1 Samuel chapter 2, if you'll turn with me in your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 2. Last week I mentioned something, and I just want to show you a couple of verses. I mentioned a proverb about raising a child without direction, without instruction, without teaching, without learning, right? I just want to show you a couple of proverbs. I went back and I found these. Something's wrong here. I hate to mention something and then not come back and tell you what it was that I was talking about. Let me get this to work right. Come on. So just a couple of proverbs. This is the one that I mentioned. I mentioned this, remember, because I said, I don't know how in the world I got to it, but we were talking about Hophni and Phinehas, the sons of Eli, and the bad decisions that they were making, and that Eli wasn't a strong enough, firm enough father. He let them get away with these things. Even enjoyed, as we'll see today, some of their sinful pattern in stealing the good meat and sharing it with their dad. This is what the Proverbs have to say about how to raise a child. It says in Proverbs 29:15, the rod, this is a disciplinary rod, and reproof give wisdom. But a child who gets his own ways brings shame to his mother. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. And I mentioned that there's this trend going on today of allowing kids what people are calling yes days. That they specify a certain day of the week, whatever it is, and on that day, it's a yes day for the kid. And whatever the child wants, you just say yes to them. There's no discipline on that day. It's whatever the kid wants. And then you open up the scriptures and you read a verse like that and you see just how wrong that is. Proverbs 22:15 says, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. So if you let a child have his own way without any discipline, without any training and reproof and correction, if you just let a child be a child, what does the Bible say you're going to get? Foolishness. Foolishness, that's what the Bible says is going to be the result of that, because inside the heart of that child is bound up, just waiting to burst out all this foolishness. If you've raised a child, you know that that's the truth. But what does God say in the Scriptures about removing the foolishness little by little from a child? The rod of discipline will remove it far from him. Disciplinary rod. Another one, Proverbs 13:24. I just throw some of these out there in case you have kids or grandkids or neighbors or nieces or nephews or anybody. Go to their parents with these verses. Let the word of God not return void. Let it have its proper end that God sent it for and God wrote it for. Let the parents know these things. When they choose to do these things, they're not doing their children any favors. And the Bible's very clear on it. Proverbs 13:24 says, he who withholds his rod hates his son. That one's tough, isn't it? He who withholds his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. So the Bible very clearly there shows a disciplining father is one who loves his son, and somebody who lets the little boy have his own way, the opposite. Jump into the New Testament with me just for a couple of verses. Important. We don't get to talk about everything in the church. We only have a couple hours a week, right? When these things come up, I need to chase them down a little bit. These things help. Hebrews 12:9. You say, well, this is an Old Testament thing. We live in different ages now where kids are different and blah, blah, blah. No, they're not. Foolishness is still bound up in the heart of every child. The heart of man is still deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Jeremiah 17:9. That's every one of us. That's our natural heart. Look what it says in Hebrews 12:9 concerning disciplining children. It says, furthermore, we had earthly fathers to discipline us. So what the writer of Hebrews is saying is, if your earthly father, your biological father, the man you call dad, if that man disciplined you, how much more will your Father in heaven, your Creator, God, discipline you? Furthermore, we had earthly fathers to discipline us, and we respected them. Right? Shall we not much rather be subject to the Father of spirits and live? Should we not accept the discipline from the Father as something that is to be respected? Should we not respect God the Father for disciplining us? It says concerning your mortal dad, for they disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them. Sometimes they don't do a perfect job. I certainly haven't done a perfect job of disciplining my children, but the Bible says they disciplined us for a short time. What is that, 18 years? 20 years maybe? 21 years in the case of Savannah. I still discipline her diligently. They disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them, but He, speaking of God the Father, disciplines us for our good, so that we may share His holiness. And the very next verse says this, and then we'll get to Samuel. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful. Any amens to that? All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. And the Bible says you're looking at it wrong. That's the wrong perspective when God disciplines you. It says, yet to those who have been trained by it, by the discipline, for those who have been trained by it, afterwards, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Now, I know every one of us wants to get to that peaceful fruit of righteousness lifestyle. God says it takes His discipline to get us there. As we wander off the sidewalk and He gives us a little slap back on the sidewalk, back on the sidewalk, back on the sidewalk. The disciplinary hand of God, the sidewalk, is that peaceful walk where we see righteousness, the fruit of righteousness. And He constantly, when we get off and we confess our sin, is constantly correcting, rebuking, adjusting, because He's a perfect God who wants us to be wonderful, useful children in His family. So, if you want wonderful, useful children in your families, you must train them. You must, the rod of discipline has to be used to drive the foolishness out of your precious baby. It's just the truth of the Word. The book of Samuel will continue to highlight this truth, not about the babies, different. The book of Samuel will continue to highlight this truth. And this is the truth. And the foolishness in the sons of Hophni and Phinehas we're seeing here in contrast to this wonderful man Samuel. And here's the truth, that Yahweh will make the barren, feeble, and insignificant who trust and obey Him. He'll make them fertile and strong. And we've seen it in Elkanah, in his wife Hannah, and we've seen it, and we will continue to see it in this man Samuel, who trusts and obeys God, and God is going to build him up into a giant of men. And here we have Hophni and Phinehas, who are giants of men. They're the children of the high priest of Israel. How many high priests of Israel are there at any given time in history? One. The spiritual leader of the chosen nation of God. There's one. There's only one man in the nation of Israel who on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, can go into the Holy of Holies, the back third of the tabernacle. There's only one man alive that can enter that space. And he's the high priest of Israel. And these two boys are the sons of the high priest of Israel. What does that make them? Next in line to be the spiritual leaders, the single most important spiritual leader on the earth. That's who their dad is. And they are next in line for that. But as we'll see today, Yahweh is no respecter of persons. You either honor God and He will honor you, or you dishonor Him and He will dishonor you. Doesn't matter who you are or what your name is. And Hophni and Phinehas are going to find that out the hard way. Yahweh will make the strong and powerful, like these boys, who do not trust and obey Him, barren, weak, and feeble. He will turn the tides on them. So here we have again Eli is the single high priest of Israel. He is the man. And his two boys, Hophni and Phinehas, men of great prestige, great honor, great family name. They're in line to be the high priests of Israel. They're strong and powerful men who will be brought down by Yahweh, who will be killed by the end of this by the end of chapter 4. And then we have these two insignificant ones, Elkanah and Hannah, insignificant people who prayed at the tabernacle for a son, and Hannah was given the son that she named Shemuel, God hears. And it's this Samuel, a man of no stature, a man of insignificance, a man by birth who has no name, no blue blood in him. He's just Joe Jew, if you will. But what will God do for Samuel? He will elevate him to a position that for all eternity men will be talking about Samuel. We're talking about him today, thousands of years after he walked this earth. And we're lifting Samuel up as a great man of God. And at the same time, we're watching Hophni and Phinehas be torn down as great as who should have been great men of God. We're doing it today. We're praising the name of this man, Samuel, for who he was. Insignificant, weak, feeble, but he trusted and obeyed God, and God made him a giant. Let that be a lesson to all of us. So what we're seeing here, as we get back into the story in verse 27, Hophni and Phinehas, the sons of Eli, these men of great privilege and prestige, power, isn't power something to be abused, unfortunately? These men of great power were stealing the choicest meat, we're talking about beef, mutton, lamb, goat, calf meat. We're talking about meat, all types of meat. They were stealing meat from the Jews who were coming to offer these sin offerings, these animals to God. These two boys were stealing Yahweh's offerings. And we also saw last week that they were actually performing sexual acts. They were having sex with the women who were helping at the tabernacle. It was debaucherous. And these were the men of power and the men of prestige, having sex with the women who were serving at the tabernacle in the area of the tabernacle. That's where they were doing this. And Yahweh will kill these two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, for their bad choices, for their lack of gratitude. We're about to see what God has done for them and for all of Israel, for their particular family, for their lack of gratitude for God, for their lack of trusting in God, for their lack of obeying God, for abusing the priesthood of God, and for making light of men's sacrifices to God. They will be killed. To whom much is given, friend, much is expected. Look at what it says in verse 27. Then a man of God came to Eli. This is an unnamed prophet sent by God with a message for his high priest. A man of God came to Eli and said to him, "Thus says Yahweh, did I not indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt in bondage to Pharaoh's house? Now beside your father there, you can write the name Aaron," because who we're dealing with here is Aaron, the first high priest. We're talking about the Aaronic priesthood here. And God says to Eli through this prophet, "Did I not reveal myself to your ancestor Aaron while he was still in Egypt? Did I not present myself to your father Aaron?" Why aren't you grateful for that? He says, "Did I not choose," verse 28, "did I not choose them?" Not anybody else in Israel, but this family. "Did I not choose them from all the tribes of Israel to be my priests? To go up to the altar? To burn incense? To carry an ephod before me? And did I not give to the house of your father Aaron all the fire offerings of the sons of Israel?" That word ephod, that is a piece of clothing, the ephod that only the high priest would wear. Colorful ephod over his robe. So he's talking about the family of the high priest here. God says, "I not only called your family out to be my priest, but I also gave them the privilege of being the high priest of Israel. The one priest who could bear an ephod before me, who could wear an ephod and come into my presence on the Day of Atonement to carry an ephod before me." We're talking about the high priesthood of Israel. Why is that not something you boys treasure? Why are you looking lightly at what I've given you? Where is your gratitude? Fire offerings here, it says all the firing offerings of the sons of Israel. Remember, the priesthood ate from the portions of the meat that the people would bring. So you did a sin that required you to bring a goat, and you would bring the goat, you'd slay the goat, you'd hand it over to the priest. They would take its blood out, they would burn portions of it or boil portions of it. It was all different depending on the animal, depending on the type of sacrifice. But the priests were given a portion of that animal as their food. That's what they ate. They weren't going to grocery stores. They weren't farming and harvesting these animals for themselves. Their time was spent at the tabernacle. So they had to be fed. And those are the firing offerings. God is saying, not only did I choose Aaron, not only did I give him the high priesthood, but I also provided perfectly for you and your families through the meat that the people would bring. So why do you want even more meat? Why isn't the meat I give you good enough? Why do you want the choicest pieces? Why are you stealing from me? Where is your gratitude? Don't you know that you are elevated above all the sons of Israel? You are my high priest. Yahweh freed Israel. This is what he's talking about here. He freed Israel from Egypt. And he made them a nation of worshipers when they were still in Egypt in bondage to Pharaoh's house. I freed you from Egyptian slavery. You're not grateful for that. He also called out the tribe of Levi and ultimately Levi's son Aaron, great-great-great-grandson Aaron, to be the high priests of Israel. Where is your gratitude? You're not responding to me properly. For everything I've given you, you should be on your knees dedicating your lives to me. But instead you're stealing from me and you're desecrating my holy place, the tabernacle, by having sexual relations with these women. And you'll die for it. You'll die for it. I just want to show you this family tree quickly. I hope you can read some of those names from where you are. The ancestors of Abiathar and Zadok. Here's Aaron. Well, we're going up. Hophni and Phinehas are right here on the family tree on the right side. By the end of this morning, if I have the time, I'm going to shift you over to the left side, because the right side's family tree branch will be cut off. God is about to curse Eli and tell him your family name will be cut off and the priesthood will be given to someone else. But here we are in timeline. Here are the two boys, Hophni and Phinehas. Their father is Eli. His father was Ithamar. That's going to be an important name, who was a son of Aaron. A direct descendant, great-great-grandson of Aaron was Hophni and Phinehas. Great-great-grandsons of Aaron, only 4 generations down. By the end of this, we're going to see that by the time the family tree goes down to Abiathar in the days of Solomon, the high priesthood is taken from him, stripped from him, and handed over to this guy, to Zadok's family line. From Abiathar and Ithamar, we are going to shift the priesthood over to not Ithamar, Aaron's son, but Eleazar. I get ahead of myself. I just want you to see where we're going. This branch, if you will, of Aaron's family tree, because of the actions of this man and this man, 2 men, and the inactivity in fatherhood of this man Eli, these 3 men are going to cause the entire branch to be cut off from the high priesthood in Israel, never to be heard from again. You blew it. You had everything. I freed you from slavery. I chose your father Aaron to be the high priest of Israel. You are in the line of the high priesthood of Aaron. But yet you think it funner to eat the fatty meat and to sleep with the women. That's what you are trading your birthright for a mess of pottage, right? Almost exactly like Esau did here. For meat, you're giving up your inheritance for meat and for the pleasures that pass quickly with these women at the tabernacle. That's what you're trading your heritage for. Foolish, foolish men. No gratitude in these boys, Hophni and Phinehas, no appreciation for the great gifts that God has given them, for the responsibilities that God has poured out onto them. They don't get it. They don't want to get it. They don't care. They just don't care. They didn't respond to God properly. Verse 29 says, God says to them, after I've done all these things for you, why do you kick at my sacrifice? Like you kick something, to look at it with disdain, it's just worthless. You just punt it down the street. And that's what God is saying they're doing with the whole Mosaic system, the Mosaic law system. You have disdain for it. You treat it lightly. You kick it like it's something insignificant. Don't you know who I am? Why do you kick at my sacrifice and my offering, which I commanded in my dwelling? They're desecrating the tabernacle. You honor your sons above me. You're supposed to be my representative in all of Israel. Yet you're honoring two sinful men above the great Creator God of the universe. This is to Eli. Harsh words. You honor your sons above me by making yourselves fat, all three of you, with the choicest of every offering of my people Israel. Remember, they would send a helper with the pitchfork to get the best meat out, and then people would bring other offerings, and they said, no, we don't. We want to cut off the best portions before you offer it to the Lord. And the Bible says if the people said, no, you can't do that, well, you tell them you're going to do it by force. You don't care what they say, because you're a man of power, and they have to do what you say. Abuse of power. Nasty thing. It's been from the days of the garden. We've seen abuses of human power, and we see them again here. God says to these boys, you honor, or to Eli about his sons, you honor your sons above me. He says, you don't honor my sacrifices, you don't honor my offerings, what they're bringing to me. Instead, you serve yourselves, food in this case, before you serve me. That food that you're serving yourselves is mine. Those offerings belong to me. They're bringing them to me as part of a Mosaic system of worship. They're bringing their sin offerings to me, their guilt offerings, even their thanksgiving offerings. And instead of you letting them get to me, instead of you simply being the conduit, they bring them to the priest, you give them to me. You think they're bringing them for you. They're not. You're stealing from me. And you're honoring your sons higher than me. What Eli should have done is to have stopped his sons from their evil ways and probably dismissed them from the priesthood. You see here, God is blaming Eli for the disaster going on in the tabernacle. He's not blaming Hophni and Phinehas. You see that, right? He's blaming the father. Where were you when this was going on? Why didn't you stop it? You know as well as anybody that foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline will drive it far from him. Yet you have raised these boys and not trained them, not rebuked them, not corrected them. And look at the monsters that they are now in the tabernacle. This is your fault, Eli. And I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to take the priesthood from you. He should have stopped it. But instead, what we see here is it says that you honor your sons above me and you make yourselves fat. What we'll see here is Eli enjoyed the fatty meat that his sons provided for him by stealing it for Yahweh. He knew clearly where that meat came from, and he enjoyed it. And what we see by the time we get to end of chapter 4, when Eli dies, that he's sitting on a chair at the opening of the tabernacle, and when he hears the bad news that his sons are dead, and then he hears that the Ark of the Covenant has been taken by the Philistines, this Eli falls backwards and he dies. And it says that he was fat, physically fat man. I wonder if he got fat because of all this wonderful meat that his sons were stealing from God and feeding him with. That's exactly what God says. You made yourselves fat off of what belonged to me. That was mine, and you stole it. Your boys did. And instead of rebuking them and keeping control, spiritual control at the tabernacle, instead of honoring me, you honored your sons and let them have their way instead of giving me my way, the Mosaic law. You see that? You honored your sons by letting them have their way. You enjoyed their company, the sinful company of these two boys. You enjoyed meals with them that you knew were stolen from me. And you let your boys have their way. What you should have done was stood up for me and my way, the worship, the proper worship of Yahweh. Verse 30 says, therefore the Lord God of Israel declares. God has presented the case like a proper judge would. He has presented the case before Eli. Eli, you have been found guilty. Pow! The gavel hits, and now the sentencing. Therefore, the Lord God of Israel, Yahweh Elohim, says, I did indeed say that your house and the house of your father should walk before me forever. I have promised that Aaron's priesthood would be an eternal and a perpetual priesthood. I promised you that. God promised the Levites that they would be the Jewish priests. And then from all of the Levites, He chose this one family, Aaron, and they would be the high priest of Israel. I'll show you this verse, Exodus 29:9. God says, I made this promise. You shall gird them with with sashes, Aaron and his sons. You see who God has chosen? Aaron and his sons. Bind caps on them, and they shall have the priesthood by a perpetual statute. So you shall ordain Aaron and his sons. God is saying, I made that promise, and I won't back away from that promise, but I choose which of Aaron's sons I will hold up as high priest. And if I want to cut off one of his family branches, it's going to fall to the ground. Nobody can stop me. And Eli, you will be cut off from Aaron's family line. Aaron's family line will continue, but not your particular branch of Aaron's family line. I will cut it off. You will no longer be, remember there, Hophni and Phinehas, Eli, Ithamar, and Aaron. That's the branch that's going to be cut off. But you see that God has already provided for Himself another branch. So He can cut this one off, no problem, no issues with the high priesthood. He simply shifts to the other son of Aaron, and that's exactly what we will see for all eternity. The priesthood, the high priesthood being from the family of Eleazar, Aaron's son Eleazar, through a man named Zadok. So it says, therefore the Lord God of Israel declares, I did indeed say that your house and the house of your father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me will be lightly esteemed. Only honor. If you honor me, I'll honor you. If you won't honor me, I'm not under any obligation to honor you because of the prestige of your family name, that you're a great-grandson, great-great-grandson of the great Aaron. I don't have to honor that at all. If you won't honor me, I won't honor you, God says very clearly. A lot of people say this is the thematic verse of 1 Samuel, this verse right here. Honor God, He'll honor you. Don't honor God, forget it. God gets to choose which branch of Aaron's family tree the high priests will come from, and Eli just found that out. No one in Aaron's house will sit as the high priest of Israel unless they honor God. Now they may begin as high priest of Israel, but they'll be knocked down by God till he finds one that will honor him properly, and he does in Zadok. Again, God doesn't have to honor people because of their pedigree or their station in life or their family name. God doesn't care about that stuff. Remember what he said? The weak, the feeble, the insignificant, he'll lift up. The strong, the powerful, the mighty who don't trust and obey, he drops down. We see it in the person of Eli, who should have been the strongest man in all of Israel. There was no king in Israel in those days. It should have been Eli. Not the king, but the high priest should have been the strongest, most powerful, most influential person in all of Israel in the days in which Samuel lived here. And he made a debauchery of it. And it's going to cost him. So God says, I will honor humans who honor me. Period. That's the decision. Just because you're Aaronic, just because you're in Aaron's family line, just because you have Aaron as a grandpa, doesn't mean anything. If you don't honor me, I will not honor you. I will not put you in a position of prestige in Israel. You will never sit as my high priest. So he's going to cut off a branch of Levi's family tree here. And as we saw, look at what I've underlined here. Yahweh will make the strong and powerful who do not trust and obey him. He will make them barren and weak and feeble. And that's exactly what we begin to see happen in this book right here. Look at what it says in verse 31. God makes prophecy. Or God makes a promise. You could say it either way. Behold, the days are coming. So are they here now? No, they're coming in the future. This is prophecy. I'm telling you how things are going to be, Eli. Behold, the days are coming when I will break your strength. Literally in the Hebrew, this means I will cut off your arm. Remember God when he leads Israel out of Egypt with an outstretched arm and a mighty hand? The arm always signifies strength here. So he is telling Eli, I will cut off your strength as high priest and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house. You have dishonored me, Eli. You chose this for yourself. You have chosen this self-induced misery for yourself. You will be miserable, and it will be your fault, not mine. And he says that Eli's sons will die young. There will not be an old man in your house. From now on, your people will die in the best parts of their life. They'll die young and strong. Not old and weak. They won't get to old and weak. I'm going to kill them while they're young. This is a high price to pay. There will not be an old man in your house. All his descendants after him also would die in the prime of their manhood. He's about to say it again. Verse 32, you will see, listen to what he tells Eli, not only am I going to cut off your family line, but you will see the distress of my dwelling. The tabernacle in Israel, historically from this point forward, started going downhill. The worship at the tabernacle. The tabernacle would be moved to a town called Nob, N-O-B. It would then be moved again. The priesthood, the authority, the prestige, the honor of the priesthood would start going down in Jewish history, especially during the days of Samuel, because Samuel would be elevated while Eli and the priests would be brought down. And God tells Eli, you're going to see this. I'm going to make you see this. You will see the distress of my tabernacle in spite of all the good I do for Israel. And an old man will not be in your house forever. So again, the tabernacle would go to Nob. It would later go to Gideon. They couldn't figure out what to do with the tabernacle. It wasn't settled like it was in Shiloh. And so you see the priesthood in a rapid decline. And he tells Eli, it's your fault, and you're going to see it. You're going to see it fall apart. Verse 33, he says, "Yet I will not cut off every man of yours from my altar." So he's not telling them they can't be priests anymore. They will not be the high priests. They're still Levites. But your sons will not serve as high priests of Israel. I'm cutting off that power and prestige from them. I'll not cut off every man of yours from my altar. And he says there's a reason for it. So that your eyes will fail from weeping. You're going to see things in the tabernacle and in your family and in the priesthood that will cause you to weep so much that your eyes will fail from weeping and your soul will grieve. Harsh sentence from God. Instead of being the most prestigious man in Israel as the high priest, the one who represents the chosen people of Israel before God, the one who represents God before the people of Israel, instead of holding on to that high position that God gave him, instead God says, I'm going to let your eyes see the demise of I'm going to let you see what you did, what you destroyed. You're going to see it all. A lot of times God doesn't just kill people that do bad things. A lot of times He lets them live so they can see the results of their labor. Just tears it down in front of them. It's exactly what He's doing to Eli. Not a God to be messed with, is He? He's simply not a God to be toyed with. I'll not cut off every man of yours from my altar, so that your eyes will fail from weeping and your soul grieve, and all the increase of your house will die in the prime of life. I'll never be an old man in Eli's house again. So Yahweh would leave some of Eli's relatives to serve at the tabernacle, so Eli would continue to be involved in the worship, so he could see and hear the stories of how worship in Israel at the tabernacle is declining, going downhill. Verse 34 says, you want to know that I'm telling the truth? I'll give you a sign. I'll give you a sign that in your future this will happen to you. He says, this will be a sign to you which will come concerning your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. On the same day, both of them will die. A prophecy? Yes. A promise? Yes. So if God is able to make two people, if God is able to prophesy that these two men will die on the same day, who does that put in charge of life and death? Only God. Only God. On the same day, in a day future, I will take the lives of both of your boys. Who can say that? Who can say that but God? God would have to be and has to be in control of human life and death for Him to be able to make such a promise. And He is, as we'll see this promise fulfilled. He doesn't have to check with anyone. The greatness of God, He doesn't have to check with anyone before giving or taking a human life. Does Satan have to check with anyone before taking a human life? Why, yes, he does. Read the book of Job. God does not. God makes decrees, and that's all there is to it. Doesn't check with anyone. Verse 35, but I will raise up for myself a faithful priest. You see, now we shift. Now we go from that right side of the family tree, and God says, I'm going to bring up a faithful priest from the left side of Aaron's family tree. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart. See, Eli let his sons have their own way and pick the choicest fat off the meat and sleep with the ladies that they wanted to sleep with. And God says, no, I will choose a man who will do things according to what's in my heart, according to what I want and in my soul. And I will build him, this faithful priest, I will build him an enduring house, not like Eli's, which no longer will endure. I'm cutting it off. I will build this faithful priest an enduring house, and he will walk before my anointed always. My anointed. Now here in context, this word, my anointed, is talking about the king who would soon come. The kings of Israel. That the high priest would walk before the kings of Israel, my anointed. There's also a far prophecy that you could make here, at least you could speak about it, because my anointed is the Hebrew word, what is it? Mashiach, which is translated into English as what? Messiah. So here you have this prophecy of God raising up a faithful priest, and you could say, wait, wasn't Jesus also a faithful high priest of God? Yes or no? Yes, he is the high priest of God. Hebrews talks all about the high priesthood of Jesus Christ. Was he also Mashiach, the anointed one of God? Well, of course he was. Jesus is the Messiah. So in a way, the ultimate prophet and priest would not be in two people, a high priest and a king. One day, one person would have both of those roles, the person Jesus of Nazareth. But I don't think in what he's saying here, ultimately, of course, it's Jesus, and you could make that argument because it's true, but he's not talking about Jesus here. He's talking about a priest who would come, a human priest, not a God man, just a man, and he's talking about the kings of Israel who would come. I will have kings in Israel beside my high priest, and the high priest will walk before them always. The king to come, I think, is my anointed here. Look what it says in verse 36. Everyone, he continues talking to Eli, this God won't let up on Eli. Everyone who is left in your house will come and bow down to him. So the sons that I will continue to let be in your house, Eli, they will bow down toward the proper high priest. They won't be the high priest. They will bow down toward my faithful priest when I raise that priest. They will bow down to him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread and say, please assign me to one of the priest's offices so that I may eat a piece of bread. It's not going to go good for Eli's descendants. A couple of verses here to show this shift. I want to show you this shift in power before we close. Just a couple of verses. God says, I'm taking your family line of high priest Eli and I'm cutting it off from Aaron's tree, and I will raise up a different faithful high priest. And this is where we see this movement. Look at these names in 1 Kings 2 verse 27. We go from Samuel through Saul, through King David, all the way to the days of Solomon. And this is what we read in 1 Kings 2:27. So Solomon the king, my anointed. Solomon dismissed Abiathar from being priest to Yahweh. Do you remember the very bottom of the list on the right-hand side under Ithamar and Eli and Hophni and Phinehas? We get down to Abiathar, and I told you I circled that this is going to be a big name. Remember this? This is the last priest in the line of Eli that God says, that's it, cut off. But look how many generations it took. Long-suffering God. From Samuel, through the 40 years of Saul, through the 40 years of David, on into the 40 years of Solomon, until he finally cut this tree off, this branch. And he had Solomon do it. Solomon dismissed Abiathar from being priest to the Lord in order to fulfill the word of the Lord which he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. Now, if you're reading the Bible now and you get to 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 27, I'm hoping that you will say, I know what that's talking about. That's going back to 1 Samuel chapter 2, where God made a promise to Eli, I'm cutting you off. That's the promise. That's the word that's being fulfilled here. It's 1 Samuel chapter 2 being fulfilled. It doesn't get fulfilled for 150 more years. Solomon dismisses Abiathar from being the priest, the high priest, in order to fulfill the word of Yahweh, the promise, the prophecy that Yahweh gave, which he had spoken concerning the house of Eli. Look a couple of verses down. I'm going from 1 Kings 2:27 to 1 Kings 2:35. You've cut off the priesthood at the moment Israel has no high priest. What now, Solomon? He shifts it. The king appointed Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, over the army. And the king appointed Zadok, the priest, in the place of Abiathar. You see the shift? God would use Solomon to shift the priesthood, the high priesthood, from that family line of Eli over to the left to the family line of Eleazar. No more Eli. Let me show you the family tree again. Here are the names at the bottom. There's Abiathar. We just heard of him. Solomon removed the priesthood from him and transferred it to this guy, Zadok. Can you see that? It's a little low. This is what happens. God takes the priesthood from this family line of Eli and He cuts it off and He shifts it over to this man Zadok, who was from Eleazar. So still Aaronic, still Aaron's family. The promise that God made to Aaron that you would have a perpetual priesthood is still valid. This is still a family line of Aaron's, but He shifts it from Aaron's son Ithamar over to Aaron's son Eleazar. I hope that visual helps you understand what I'm saying. So I show you another verse, one last verse, and we close. How long will this last? In the days of King Solomon, there's a man named Zadok. And Zadok and his family become the high priests of Israel. For how long? Well, forever. Keep reading. I'm going to show you a verse. Before you read it, I'm going to tell you that this verse is from Ezekiel chapter 44. Now, does anybody know in Ezekiel chapter 40, all the way to the end of the chapter, verse 48, what the topic is? Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48, a very, very famous section of Scripture, especially if you're a prophecy nut. In Ezekiel chapter 40, all the way to Ezekiel chapter 48, God discusses the millennial temple. That's the topic. Are we in the millennium now? No, we are in the church age. How does the church age end? What are we waiting for? The rapture of the church. We will all be snatched off. If you believed in Jesus Christ, one day the voice of the archangel, the sound of the trumpet call of God will sound. Jesus will come back to the clouds. He will snatch all believers off the earth. White, black, red, yellow, male, female, old, young, all of us gone in an instant. That's the promise of the Scripture, the rapture of the church. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. After that event, the earth is still here. We're just not on it anymore. And the earth has to continue down time. There's a 7-year period coming called what? The tribulation. There's a 7-year tribulation coming to earth, the end of the age of Israel. After that 7 years, Jesus Christ, according to Revelation 19, will come back on a white horse, not into the clouds, but all the way to earth. He will plant His feet on the Mount of Olives. He will undergo the battles of Armageddon, this campaign of Armageddon that takes days and days to fight. And Jesus will set Himself up in Israel, in Jerusalem, in a rebuilt millennial temple as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and He will be the King of Israel on this earth for 1,000 years. We call that the mille, the 1,000. Mil is a word, even in Spanish, mil means 1,000. It's a 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ, the millennium. Now, I said all that to make this statement. There will be a temple in Jerusalem during the millennium. And in Ezekiel chapter 40, all the way to Ezekiel chapter 48, God describes this temple. If you have a Jewish temple, you have to have a Jewish high priest, right? The high priest runs the temple. In the millennium, which is a future event, We're looking back at the days of Solomon, 1000 BC, call it, 1050 BC even. We're looking back 3,000 years in human history, and Solomon takes the priesthood from the family of Eli and this man Abiathar and shifts it over to Zadok's family. 3,000 years have gone by. Who's the priest in Israel? Zadok is. Because when we get to Ezekiel chapter 44, we read about the priesthood in the millennium, and look who the high priest is. But the Levitical priests, the sons of who? Zadok. This transfer of priesthood from Eli's family to Zadok's family will never be changed. It's now perpetually the priesthood of Zadok, and his family will be the high priests. The Levitical priests, the sons of Zadok, who kept the charge of my sanctuary when the sons of Israel went astray. Faithful priest. Remember, God says, I will raise up for myself a faithful priest. We can't tell the history of when Israel went astray and what Zadok's people did, but it's there. The sons of Zadok shall come near to me to minister to me. To the Messiah, Jesus Christ, seated as the King of Kings in the temple in Jerusalem, the capital of the world. The high priest who would come and serve him were the sons of this man Zadok. They shall come near to me to minister to me, and they shall stand before me to offer me the fat. Isn't that an interesting statement? The fat and the blood. And what is it that Eleazar's boys, Hophni and Phinehas, were stealing? The fat. But not the faithful priest. The faithful priest will understand that that belongs to me. And they will offer to me the fat and the blood, declares the Lord God. They shall enter my sanctuary, the temple. They shall come near me they shall come near to my table to minister to me and keep my charge. They will be faithful to me, these men, the sons of Zadok. You want to talk about another man I can't wait to meet? Zadok. A giant among men, the way Samuel is. I hope that has I hope that is clear, at least somewhat clear. These lessons are all recorded. They're all placed on YouTube. By this afternoon, Paul will have them on YouTube if you need to and want to listen to it again to figure out just what it is I just said. There they are on YouTube. You can go to them there and watch them. I'm always available to answer any questions, show you my notes, draw diagrams. Listen, as a pastor, all I want is for you to understand this. I want you to get this. This isn't a history lesson. This is a lesson about God and proper worship of God. And He will only let men who honor Him serve Him. And He's named the man for all time who will do it, the sons of Zadok. And that's a big point. That's what I'm trying to get across. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly